Hello, I'm Dr. Basil Constantine. I'm here from the ACU Online Writing Center's southernmost outpost in Antananarivo, Madagascar. Today we're going to talk about how to show insight and critically review data about yourself. Because this is one of our MBA coffee break webinars, we're going to gloss through the normal information, but you can pause on any of these slides if you want to see more information. We have coming up this Tuesday evening our Avoiding Plagiarism with APA 7 webinar and a bunch of other releases that might be of interest to you. If you are not familiar with our sorted course catalog on the webinar webpage, if you scroll down past the schedule of upcoming webinars, you'll find this tabbed browsing area where you can go ahead and select your program and see a guide sorted by course number to see all the webinars that we have that tie in directly to things for that class. I'm going to be recommending that you use our APA course paper template, which you can download from the link at the top. And with that, let us dive into our main areas of focus today. So, ways of conveying insight. When you're asked to demonstrate insight into something, whether it's a problem, a case study, or a self-assessment, it is important to do more than just give summaries. It's important to show that you understand what these results are and what their implications are. So that leads us to the question of what is insight? If we look at Merriam-Webster dictionary, it offers an accurate and deep understanding, which is a fine way to look at it. But if we go a little bit deeper with this Cambridge dictionary definition, a clear, deep, and sometimes sudden understanding of a complicated problem or situation. So insights don't come generally from just reporting surface characteristics. It comes from looking deeper at, where might this come from? What may have caused this? What are the implications? What are the solutions? What are the best ways forward, perhaps? And that is something that this particular assignment that we're going to be focusing on today asks you to go deeper on. Now, when you're trying to demonstrate insight, a couple of things that we recommend not doing. First, do not have paragraphs that are all summary. Summary only does not demonstrate insight, it demonstrates regurgitation, which isn't nearly as interesting. Don't report things without also taking some time to explain the implications. Now, you can have a paragraph that has the report and a follow-up paragraph that does the analysis, but in general, you'll have better flow and greater clarity if you focus on one thing at a time, report, then analyze, and trade off like that. You also want to avoid having very short sentences, in which we'll say that, not exclusively, but a good rule of thumb, if it's less than half a line of text, it's probably too short for graduate level writing. You also don't want to have writing that's too long, which here we'll say that if it's more than 3 lines, it's very likely longer than it should be, long enough that people lose focus when reading it, and that'll be benefit from subdividing it. You also don't want to bury the main idea or focus in the middle of a paragraph. If the function of the paragraph is to discuss your results, well, you should be mentioning your results right at the start, so we know that that's what you're doing. If the focus is on explaining what a survey tracks, then lead with that and then unpack it. Don't start discussing the different things it tracks and then say, okay, and this is used for this thing. Well, that it's used for this thing would be helpful to get at the beginning. On the other side, some things to do when you are demonstrating insight into something. Make sure you provide a concise summary of the key issues or opportunities. I say concise summary because there will always be more details than you have space to include, and details that will be distracting to have. So make sure you focus on the most important things and demonstrate that those are important by discussing them. If you're not discussing them, well, then they're probably not important enough to be including in your concise summary. And make sure that you explain why addressing whatever it is you're doing matters. What's the big picture here? What happens when you apply it? Why is it important to apply it? And if you didn't address it, what would happen? Now, when you were talking about taking a survey or some other sort of test or assessment about yourself, generally you're not doing it out of simple idle curiosity. It's intended to facilitate something, which it could be your understanding things or being at peace with something. It could be facilitating action. It could be planning self-improvement. These are all possibilities of which your particular explanation for why this matters will give gravity to it, that will show that this is worth discussing because you are able to highlight reasons why it is important to address. Another way to address it is to break a task into discrete steps, or to break analysis into discrete steps. So in the assignment we're going to be looking at, it has 4 different axes in which characteristics are tracked, and so there are 8 possible tendencies there, and you can discuss both what each thing represents, any plans related to it, and any implications of that. For example, you also want to ground your recommendations or choices, whatever they should be, in both evidence-based practice and theory. Now you can also ground it in your own self-assessment and insight. You know yourself pretty well in many respects, but it will be even stronger and demonstrate more insight if you are also grounding it in evidence-based practice and theory, some of which will come from the literature about a test itself, because most have been validated and evaluated in different ways, and the website here does actually include links to a number of things there. With that, let's take a moment and talk about the Week 3 assignment here for BUSA 636. So this is the Learning Styles Inventory assignment and the Organizational Behavior course. And it starts with the preamble. It recaps some things from the previous course, discussing the importance of individual personality when considering a career, and that there's a lot of individual variation. Some people like getting the big picture first, and others prefer to go step by step before they come to understand the larger whole, and other things like that, which this assessment will actually be delving into. Now, this overview is not just a little bit of background, it's also reminding you about some of the things that you studied in the previous class last week, in the previous module, that you might potentially be bringing back and referring to when you contextualize and discuss your results. So that's a hint there on some of the things that you can do. Now, then when we move into the instructions proper for the assignment, it says, okay, take the Index of Learning Styles questionnaire, print your assessment results. That is an instruction basically to make sure you've got a copy of that so you can refer to it. Otherwise, it's very easy to confuse or forget what you got. And there's an instruction to go, after you take the test, to follow the link at the bottom to see what the guidance is on how to interpret your results. And to keep in mind that this is not an absolute. The goal of this particular questionnaire is to illuminate you about some of your own preferences. And if you know what is most comfortable for you, that's helpful to know, because you might be capable of doing more than one thing, but given the choice, you have where you are more efficient or more happy, and on the flip side, you might also know that you can shift according to someone else's needs, and that is also a helpful thing to know. All right, and then the main part, write a short paper that includes reporting your learning styles. We're going to come back to that in a moment. And to include a short paragraph just about how your personal learning style fits with the format of the course, including at least one suggestion for ways you could change your behaviors to improve your results in the course. Now, probably you're going to be having more than one suggestion, because a suggestion for changing a behavior related to each of the 4 learning style categories, the 4 axes, which there are then 8 possible results areas. Very likely you're going to be doing something different for each of those 4 axes. So, and then of course you want to make sure that you format this in APA style. There's the additional note. This is house style, so not an APA style per se, but something your professor is saying to do. Put your name in the upper left-hand corner of the paper and include the word count. Okay. And then if we look at the rubric, we see that it's by the number of points. This is going to be a fairly short paper. We have giving the results in the format that includes an insightful discussion. Okay, so coming back to the earlier notes about that, an insightful discussion of how your personal learning style fits with the format of the course, and then suggestions for ways that you can change your behaviors to improve your results in the course. So that, I would say, should be a bit more than 1 sentence. It's probably going to be a paragraph of at least equal length to the one where you report your results and discuss how they fit or don't fit with the format of the course. And then the rest is, is this formatted correctly? Have you done your due diligence and proofreading, etc.? Now, if you watched our webinar for last week, you'll know that in that webinar, we discussed subjective and objective language for discussing the results about yourself, especially when you're doing a self-assessment. And this is something where you will be presenting your results. You'll be interpreting them according to the literature provided, providing insights, I hope. And so there's going to be some objective discussion, and there's also going to be when you discuss, well, how you feel about that, which will be subjective. So you're going to be using both of these. You may want to revisit the webinar from last week or watch it if you haven't seen it before. But this is going to come down to reporting your results and discussing objectively, this is what the guidelines say this means, and subjectively, well, this is what this means to me. So I went ahead and I went through this as assessment, and I came up with this results column to use in our discussion. Now, if we look back at the instructions, you'll see that the learning styles is request to report it in this format here, where there's a letter representing your preference in each scale. This is going top to bottom. And if you're looking carefully at this last one, you might see a small problem with that. Because while the first one, okay, A or R, the second one, S or I, the third one we have visual and verbal, those both start with V. And the last one is S, G, no problem there. So I'm going to suggest, and you can always ask your professor if you want to be extra certain about this, but I'm going to suggest that you use VI or VE, depending on your results, so showing a preference for visual or verbal. And what that does is it avoids any confusion about which one you mean by having just the V. This is not something that APA style says exactly what to do, so this is something where this is a very easy way of following the results, but if in doubt, check with your professor. Now, again, if you are interpreting your results using the assessment criteria or the documentation provided here, which are referred to in the assignment guidelines, you're going to be using objective phrasing. And when it comes to interpreting or deciding what you're going to do with those results, that's going to be subjective phrasing. Do make sure you cite the sources, especially when referring to those objective criteria. No, you can have both subjective and objective phrasing in the same sentence, but it's often helpful to separate that just to make sure you're doing everything that it's asking, where it's asking you to do that. If you decide to discuss past events in relation to your results, make sure that you give us the objective description and then the subjective part, because it's a more logical order. And then I've included slides on the differences between subjective and objective language in case that is something you need a little review on or clarification after last week. So subjective is going to be related to your personal feelings, tastes, point of view, or opinions. And this is usually going to be something that is not empirically measurable. How you feel about your results. You're not taking a separate assessment on that. So it's really, okay, how do you feel right now and why? objective. That's going to be what's not influenced by personal feelings, tastes, point of view, or opinions. So when you're discussing the results, the authors say this is what this means. So if you're discussing that, you are reporting it objectively. You might be critically analyzing and applying it to things, but still the report of, okay, well, these authors said this means this. That's going to be objective language. So, when do you use these? Well, is it a question of what something is? That's going to be objective. And what do you want or desire or plan to change? That'll be subjective. Now, when you are citing and referencing your results, it's important to start by adding all the sources that you're going to be citing to your references list. Why? Well, because the ILS, the Index of Learning Styles questionnaire, is available online and much of the documentation is online, most of those web pages do not have publication dates on them. So you use, in place of the year, N period, D period, and then you sort works by the same author that don't have dates alphabetically by the title of the web page or the document. And the first one in the list will be N period D period dash A. This next one will be N period D period dash B. And so if you have more than these two, you're going to need more letters, and possibly your letters will change if something comes early in the alphabet than index, for example. But these are two sources that are referred to directly in the instructions, so I'm pretty sure you will be citing them. Make sure that if you are doing additional sources, that you spend a while to check. If you're wondering where that came from, so this is the Index of Learning Styles questionnaire page. So this is where you go to take the test, and you see that there's the title of the page up here, and because it's the title of a test, assessment, survey instrument, in APA style you capitalize those in title case, which is how you get this here. The link goes after that, and then after you take this, as at the bottom of the fourth page, you'll submit it, and then you'll be given a link to this page here, which is a document that explains the learning styles and strategies that you're getting tested on. If you're wondering how you might cite and refer to these, well, the first time you mention it, you absolutely want to have a full citation. My Index of Learning Styles results were blah, blah, blah. And you can see that after the name of the questionnaire, Index of Learning Styles, that's where you put the author, date, and year information. Sorry, the author and date information. The reason there is that you are identifying, oh, this is the test I took. But if someone checked that citation, they wouldn't get your results. They can't retrieve your results. So that's why the citation is saying, oh, that's where the test itself is, as opposed to your results, which are not retrievable by them. Now, if you're citing the second one here, the learning styles and strategies, well, according to our reference entry so far, that's N period D period dash B. So you just use that where the publication year will be. Oh, according to Felder and Solomon, active listeners tend to. And once you've identified the source explicitly in the paragraph, you don't need to include the author date citation every time you mention it. So after that initial sentence, you can say, oh, after reviewing my Index of Learning Styles results, I plan to, and then whatever you list out there. Now, when you're outlining and drafting, do make sure to use the APA course paper template. That will save you a lot of time and trouble and help avoid some common mistakes that can lead you to not get full credit, especially considering that the APA compliant formatting is a third of the grade for this paper. And I think that's about it. Thank you for joining us for this MBA Coffee Hour webinar. And again, if you want to revisit any of the things in the previous webinar, you can find that on our webpage. But if you have questions, send us an email at onlinewritingcenter@acu.edu. If you want to schedule an appointment for feedback on a draft, go ahead and you can go to my.acu.edu and access the Writing Center scheduling system, or go right to the Writing Center website. All right, have a good day, everyone.